Here's the finished project. In the ceiling behind the listening area, I have 6.5-inch speakers for the rear channels. Within these tray portions of the ceiling, I have 6.5-inch rounds for the center listening area. For my front speakers, I have 8-inch three-ways. And on each side, I have 10-inch subwoofers, which are also enclosed in a box. And then I have a nice center channel with a pair of 5.5s in it and a tweeter. And in each of the small shelves I have a small LED light which really accents the shelves very nicely. And I made the bottom shelves deep enough to put in basically any electronic equipment that I want to put in there. One of the most important things to do on one of these projects is to give it a uniform look. And by that I mean this is exactly 6 inches. This is 6 inches. This is 6 inches. This is 6 inches. And from the baseboard up to the bottom of the shelf is also 6 inches. So it gives it a nice even look. And that's a heavy plasma TV mounted, and the electrical comes in behind the TV so you don't see any wires down below it. Here is the space I had to work with. The wall behind the ladder is block and used to be the outside wall of the house with 2 windows. I removed the windows and filled the space with soundproofing insulation so the TV wouldn't be too loud in the bedroom on the other side. I also removed the popcorn texture off the ceiling by wetting and scraping it off with a 4-inch drywall knife. Easily done if it has never been painted over. Luckily it hasn't. The first step was to determine the height we wanted the TV and what size of one we will eventually want to hang there. We currently have an older 60-inch plasma, which is really heavy, and when it goes out we will most likely go with a 70-inch LCD. Now, considering the dimensions of that size TV and allowing for a little bezel room, we drew it on the wall with a thick carpenter's pencil. We wanted shelves on either side to put pictures, small vases, and other knickknacks in, and shelves on the bottom to put the electronic devices. With a little use of Microsoft Paint and a lot of drawing, erasing, and redrawing on the wall, we had the design we wanted. Another thing important, or maybe the most important thing to consider, is the sound system. In our last home, we had a 5.1 surround system with the speakers mounted on the walls and the corners near the ceiling. My wife didn't like the aesthetics of it, so this design would have to house in-wall and ceiling speakers for a 7.2 surround system. Instead of a flat-faced wall, we wanted it to have a 3-dimensional look. I began by figuring the depth of the deepest electronic device I would want to put in it, which was my home theater PC, and adding 4 inches for rear wiring and 2 inches for the sliding glass doors in the front. I determined the shelves needed to be 20 inches deep. I wanted the sides and top to stand out 4 inches from that, so 2 feet for the sides and top. Since the bottom shelf face was set back 4 inches from the top and side faces, I was going to do the same with the side shelves, but it didn't work out that way. I wanted all the spaces between the shelves 6 inches wide to give it a uniform look, and to do that meant the shelves would be too small to be 16 inches deep. So I set them back 8 inches, making the shelves 1 foot deep, which looked right proportionally. The center channel speaker will be above the TV, and that space will be 8 inches set back from the side shelves, making it 4 inches deep. Just right for the mounting depth of the speaker, and still look nice since it matched the 8-inch setback of the side shelves from the lower shelf face. The space from the bottom of the speaker shelves to the floor had to be 11 inches, allowing for the 6-inch space and 5-inch baseboards. So going by that, I knew how wide and tall the bottom shelves would be. Never thought a simple project like this would take so much planning, especially when having to compensate for the 1/2-inch drywall thickness. I spent more time sitting in front of this wall thinking about the design than the actual building of it, but time well spent. Now for the wiring. Each bottom shelf would require an AC outlet as well as one behind the TV. Also coaxial, HDMI, network, and phone lines. There was already a phone line and 2 outlets on the wall. I just had to relocate one and add 2 more. I fortunately thought ahead and run coaxial line through the wall for satellite or cable. The speaker wiring was a little easier since it didn't need to be run in the attic or behind the walls except for the rear speakers, which was run to the ends of the trays and then up into the attic a short distance. I used wire looms and labeled each wire as I run them. The subs were wired with heavier gauge multi-strand wire. Not wanting to crawl to the eave of the house in the attic and also wanting to give some design to the ceiling and accent the hallway into the bedroom and guest bathroom, I decided to tray the ceiling on both sides to mount the center ceiling speakers and recessed lighting. I put down the pressure-treated 2x4s first at 23.5 inches, again allowing for the ½ inch of drywall thickness. I used round masonry nails instead of the typical square ones. I discovered these when I was framing the guest bathroom. I pre-drilled the holes in the concrete with a smaller concrete bit using a hammer drill and drilled the board with a regular bit. They drive in nicely and don't bend or bust up the concrete like the square nails do, just a little more time consuming to do. Here's a tip: drill the 2x4 holes first with the board in place and go deep enough to make a dimple in the concrete. Then move the board and use a hammer drill to drill the holes in the concrete. Also let the concrete bit cool down between holes or the tip will melt. Buy several, you will need them because they dull quickly. Next, I attached the boards up on the ceiling. The ceiling had some sags in it and it took some wedging with other 2x4s from the floor to the ceiling to get it flush with the ceiling. But it took out the sags, which was a nice benefit. I used number 8 star drive construction screws for most of the project. I can't recommend these enough. They don't strip out like Phillips head screws do. I drilled out a hole large enough to fit the screw head and driver into the 2x4s so the screw heads would be below the surface. I used 1 3/4 inch for most of the framing and 2 1/2 inch for the boards that needed to be screwed up on edge. With the ceiling and floorboards in place, I measured the length for the vertical sideboards. You want these to be a tight fit, but not too tight so they don't bow. Having everything drawn on the wall allowed me to take measurements quickly for the shelves. Make sure you take into account the thickness of the 2x4 that runs along the top as well as the 1/2 inch thickness of the drywall. After cutting all the pieces for the shelves, I laid them out on the floor and used a pneumatic nail gun to assemble them and use screws to attach them into the wall unit. After shelves are in place, you have to consider any extra framing you need to add for attaching the drywall to and for support. After the framing was done, I installed 6 recessed light fixtures and run the wiring. I added another switch box to another wall and installed a dimmer switch. My wife and I were in a doctor's office and noticed a built-in shelf unit which had small LED lights in the top of each shelf, and we really liked them, so we did the same. I ran the wire from the switch to a junction box, then out to the 3 lights on one side, and then to another junction box on the other side to feed the 3 lights on that side, leaving no exposed connections. You don't want wires with wire nuts hanging loosely. After testing, I removed the lights and placed the wires where I could get to them through the 1-inch hole for the light after I hung the drywall. Before I laid down the first board, I picked out and ordered the speakers. Best to have them and know how they need to be installed first. I read many reviews about wall and ceiling speakers, and not wanting to spend an arm and a leg on them, I went with these monoprice speakers. I built sealed boxes for the 10-inch subs with about 3/4 cubic foot of space inside and tested them. The bass was deep and clear and had great sound even at low volume. The boxes are made from 3/4 MDF shelving board. For the 8-inch 3-ways, I sectioned off an area above the subs large enough to give me about the same 3/4 cubic foot space. I got a little creative and used concrete board with a porous backside facing the rear of the speakers to absorb sound. I will also be stuffing all the wall speaker cavities with loose insulation. Notice I didn't skimp on the silicone caulking. These are designed for open baffle, but when I was younger I built many speaker enclosures and discovered if it produces bass, it should either be sealed or ported, and porting a homemade box and getting it right is hit and miss. Sealed boxes give a tight, accurate sound and is more forgiving with smaller enclosures. 2 of the 4 6.5-inch ceiling speakers will be mounted in the tray ceiling between the recessed lights, and 2 will be mounted in the ceiling behind the seating area for the rear sound. Now time to hang drywall, and I don't like working with it. If you can afford to hire someone else to do it, do it. But if you're like me, you have to go it alone. Once you get the hang of cutting it, it's not too bad. You will need a 4-foot long drywall square and a utility razor knife. With the smooth front side facing you, cut through the paper with the knife. You don't need to cut deep, just through the paper, and bend the board in the opposite direction of the cut side to snap it. Then cut the paper on the other side while the board is folded 90 degrees or a little more to follow the cut. After you cut a few pieces, you will get the hang of it. When all the drywall has been installed, it's time to put on the corner bead. I use metal bead. The first couple of pieces I put on, I used an air-powered stapler and got one of them too close to the corner, making a sloppy edge. After fighting with the staples getting them out, I went to using drywall screws. I used coarse thread 1.25-inch drywall screws for the drywall and beads. I used 4, 6, and 10-inch drywall taping knives. No matter how many how-to videos you watch or how much someone tells you, taping and mudding takes practice. The best advice I can give is to add water to your compound to thin it out to the consistency of mayonnaise. It smooths out a whole lot easier. I did a lot of sanding and reapplying before I got the hang of it. At times I would have to walk away from it and come back later. Taper joints are a piece of cake, but butt joints have to be mudded out 6 to 8 inches from the seam on either side to hide the hump from the tape and the mud. Where possible, avoid as many butt joints as you can, even though it wastes drywall. I scraped off all the popcorn from the ceiling throughout the dining room area and touched up any nicks I made. The walls had a skip trowel texture and we wanted knockdown, so the walls had to be sanded down as well to knock down the high spots, which created a lot of dust. Make sure you wear a good dust mask and section off other rooms with painter's plastic. I purchased a 9-foot wide by 400-foot roll of it, and it's thin and light enough to easily hang with masking tape. I set up a box fan in a window on a side of the house that the wind wasn't blowing towards, and opened up a window on the opposite side, and it pulled the dust out quickly, but dust still finds its way everywhere. We also removed the bedroom-sized window and cut the wall lower and installed a larger one. I retextured the walls and ceiling using a hopper sprayer and gave them a knockdown texture, then primed and painted them. I removed the old carpeting and put down the vapor barrier and 2mm padding and installed vinyl flooring without any transitions from the bedroom through the TV room and dining room. Then I installed the baseboards, the fan, the TV, speakers, and lights, some new furniture, and the project is finally finished. One thing I was surprised by is the way the enclosure amplifies the TV speakers. Even without the surround sound on, the TV sounds great. If I was to do anything different, I would have added 2 more speakers in the center listening area for an Atmos system. But I'm happy with it and my wife loves it. Now she would only let me crank it up.